Some people don't approach you to love you. They approach you to use you, to drain the parts of you they lost in themselves long ago. And they'll wrap it in beautiful language, make it sound noble, make it sound like connection. But Jung warned us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. You don't see them coming because they ask for things you've been trained to give: affection, empathy, loyalty. But what if I told you, the very things they ask for are the weapons they'll use to gut you from the inside out? This is not a warning. This is an initiation into the darker levels of psychological warfare. Because this world is not built on love. It is built on shadow. And Jung didn't write for the weak-hearted. He wrote for those who dare to look inward and confront the monsters that smile. Let's start with the first thing manipulative souls ask for. Not money, not power, something deeper: your guilt. 1. They ask you to feel guilty for them. They won't say it outright. No, they're too clever for that. Instead, they'll bleed just enough pain in front of you, so you become the caretaker of their misery. They weaponize their wounds and make you feel like if you don't help them, you're the bad one. I thought you were different. You're the only one I trust. If you leave me, I'll fall apart. It's not a cry for help. It's emotional extortion. They're not healing, they're feeding. Feeding on your instinct to fix, to love, to be good. Carl Jung understood this dance of shadows. He called it the projection of the unconscious, where a person externalizes their unhealed trauma, then hooks someone else's soul into carrying it for them. And here's the brutal truth. The more guilt you absorb from others, the less access you have to your own intuition. Guilt hijacks your internal compass, and suddenly you're living their life, solving their chaos while your own soul starves. Stay away from people who demand your guilt, because they will never heal until you are destroyed. 2. They ask you to sacrifice yourself in the name of love. This is the second doorway to psychological decay. They'll ask for your time, your attention, your energy, all in the name of love. But real love does not ask for self-erasure. Real love doesn't make you question your worth or silence your needs. The manipulators? They redefine love as obedience. If you don't give them what they want, they say you're withholding, closed off, unloving. They demand your sacrifice and call it intimacy. Jung spoke of the animus and anima, the inner masculine and feminine energies that must stay in balance for psychological health. But when someone demands you give and give and give, they're not trying to balance you. They're trying to consume you. They don't want a partner. They want a mirror that reflects back the parts of them they refuse to fix. They'll say, if you loved me, you'd stay. If you loved me, you'd forgive. If you loved me, you'd change. But what they really mean is, if you love me, you'll stop loving yourself. And you do. You bend. You break. You disappear. And they still call it love. But what they love is your obedience, not you. 3. They ask you to silence your instincts. This one is subtle, but deadly. Ever been around someone who makes you second-guess yourself constantly? Who floods your mind with doubt the moment you speak your truth? They don't ask you directly. They just react, with coldness, mockery, confusion. And your instincts begin to fade into shame. You say, something feels off. They say, you're paranoid. You say, I need space. They say, you're abandoning me. Carl Jung said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And when they see you listening to your inner voice, they feel threatened. So what do? They discredit your intuition. Not because it's wrong, but because it makes them feel powerless. See, manipulators don't want to control your body. They want to control your perception. Because if they can convince you that your gut is a liar, then they can sell you any truth they want. The price? You abandon your soul to protect their ego. And by the time you realize what happened, you're not even sure what you believe anymore. Stay away from anyone who makes your intuition feel like a crime. Because once they've buried your inner compass, they can lead you anywhere they want, even straight to your own ruin. Here's what no one tells you. The most dangerous people in your life will not come with horns. They will come with needs. Needs you were raised to fulfill. Needs you confuse with love. But Jung didn't just study darkness, he entered it. And he returned with this. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Because once you accept your own darkness, you can finally see the darkness in others, without denying it. And that's the beginning of liberation. Not through kindness, but through clarity. Stay away from people who ask you for your guilt, your self-sacrifice, your silence. They are not asking you for these things to get closer. They are asking you for these things so you cannot escape. In the next part, we'll descend deeper into the final two asks, the most insidious ones, the ones that seem harmless, but rot your psyche from the inside. We will rip the mask off manipulation's most seductive tactic. If you've ever been emotionally enslaved and didn't know why, you will now. You've heard it said, be kind, be giving, be forgiving. But what they never warned you about are the predators who weaponize those very virtues to steal your soul while smiling. Jung's work was never for the polite. It was for those willing to see beneath the surface, where light becomes delusion, and the mask of love becomes a cage. Now we enter the darker half of this ritual. The final two things manipulators ask for. But these are not spoken aloud. They are siphoned, like a psychic vampire draining you while whispering. This is what connection feels like. For they ask you to abandon your past. They don't say, forget who you were. They say, why are you still holding on to that? That was a long time ago. You're not the same person anymore. And that may sound like wisdom. But look deeper. Because what they're really saying is, the version of you that remembers the truth is inconvenient for me. Your past holds patterns, wounds, betrayals, and worst of all, memories that contradict the story they're trying to sell you now. They can't control the present if you still trust your own history. So what do? They seduce you into spiritual amnesia. They gaslight your pain. They reframe your scars. And when you flinch, they say, you're being dramatic. You're stuck in the past. You're too sensitive. But sensitivity is not weakness. It's awareness. And Jung knew. What we repress in the name of peace will return. With fangs. To manipulate you fully, they need you to forget. Forget the first red flag. Forget the time they lied. Forget how you always felt smaller around them. And if they succeed, you wake up one day with no narrative of your own, only the one they wrote for you. But here's the cruel paradox. They don't forget their past. They use it to guilt you, to justify their coldness, to keep you bending around their pain like a puppet made of shame. So remember this. Anyone who asks you to forget your pain, but never forgets theirs, does not want healing. They want dominance. Carl Jung warned us. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And if they can't face theirs, they will drag you down into forgetting yours. 5. They ask you to be who they want, not who you are. Now we reach the final ask. The most seductive one. The one that feels like love. Until it's too late. They don't ask you to be fake. They just show you who you're allowed to be. They laugh harder when you play dumb. They pull away when you show strength. They reward obedience with affection. And punish truth with withdrawal. They sculpt you, subtly, with glances, with reactions, with shame, until you're not sure if you're being authentic, or simply surviving. Carl Jung called this process the false self, a mask we wear to protect ourselves from rejection. But the longer we wear it, the more we suffocate beneath it. Here's how you'll know. You start editing your thoughts before you speak. You start questioning if your anger is too much. You start shrinking to keep the peace. They never said, don't be yourself. But every time you were, they made you regret it. So you mold, bend, adapt. And one day, you wake up surrounded by people who love. A version of you that doesn't exist. That is soul death. Because the final tactic of the manipulator isn't to destroy you. It's to make you destroy yourself. For their approval. That's not love. That's domestication. And Jung? He didn't just call this dangerous. He called it evil. Because when someone demands you betray your inner truth to earn their affection, they are not building a bond. They are building a prison. You were taught to avoid your darkness. But Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And you can't become that if you're constantly editing your soul to fit someone else's fragile ego. You must reclaim the parts of you they made you abandon. Your instincts, your rage, your clarity, your voice. Because the people who ask for your guilt, your sacrifice, your silence, your past, your identity, they don't want a relationship. They want a replica. But you were not born to be reshaped. You were born to remember. The world is filled with people who say, I love you, but really mean, I need you to be who I say you are. Jung's legacy is not about light. It's about integration. Knowing your shadow. Protecting it. Using it as a shield against the soft smiles of those who seek to consume you. Because this world will not hand you freedom. It will hand you performance, compliance, disguised as connection. But beneath all the manipulation, you still remain. The voice, the fire, the rebel, the one who says, no more. In part 3, we go deeper into Carl Jung's psychology of projection and how manipulators use your empathy as a leash. You'll learn how even your kindness becomes a trap in their hands, and how to burn the leash without burning yourself. They don't steal your soul by force. They seduce it, with wounded eyes, with tragic stories, with the illusion that you're the only one who understands them. But what if I told you, the person who makes you feel chosen is often the one sent to hijack your identity? You thought you were connecting. What you were actually doing was becoming addicted to being needed. Jung saw this dark spiral clearly. When an inner situation is not made conscious, it appears outside as fate. Let that settle. The people who shatter us most are often mirrors of the parts we refuse to face. And the most terrifying part? You didn't just fall into their trap. You co-signed it. Because your empathy became the rope you tied around your own throat. Let's tear that rope off, thread by thread. The psychological parasite, how they infect your empathy. Empathy is not love. Empathy is awareness of another's feelings. But here's what no one teaches. If you lack boundaries, empathy becomes emotional possession. They cry. You bleed. They panic. You lose sleep. They fall apart. You carry the weight of their destruction like it's your sacred duty. But here's the ugly secret. Some people know how to exploit that. They perform weakness so you perform strength. They weaponize tears so you lower your guard. They show you brokenness, not to heal, but to own you. Carl Jung believed that unconscious people cast their inner wounds onto others. So when you become their emotional sponge, you're not helping them evolve. You're helping them project. And in this projection, you begin to dissolve. You wake up feeling tired but don't know why. You dread their texts but feel guilty ignoring them. You cancel your own plans just to be their crutch. Again, you've been infected. Not by their pain, but by your own unconscious need to be needed. Why it feels so good to be chosen, and why that's dangerous. In the beginning it feels like purpose. They say, I've never told this to anyone before. You get me in a way no one else does. You're my safe place. And it floods your nervous system with meaning. But beneath that glow lurks a trap. They aren't choosing you. They're using you as a storage unit for their shadow. And once you become their emotional dumping ground, you mistake it for intimacy. But it's not intimacy. It's enmeshment. A psychological merger where your pain and theirs become indistinguishable. Now here's what Jung would say. This kind of bond is not love. It's projection collusion. You've allowed them to outsource their inner chaos to your nervous system. And in return you feel important. Because no one ever taught you that real love does not make you a container for someone else's madness. The empathy trap is rooted in your childhood wounds. You didn't become an emotional savior by accident. Somewhere in your childhood, you were trained to attune to chaos, to monitor the room, to regulate other people's moods as a way to survive. You became hyper-attuned, not because you're deeply compassionate, but because you were unprotected. And when you meet someone with unmet needs, you feel it's your job to fill them. That's not empathy. That's trauma reenactment. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. You keep attracting these emotional parasites, because a part of you needs to feel useful to feel safe. But here's the paradox. The more useful you try to be to the wrong people, the more your soul begins to rot. Signs you're in the empathy trap. You feel guilty when you set boundaries. You're exhausted after every interaction. You fear they'll fall apart if you stop helping. You begin hiding your own pain because they have it worse. You fantasize about escaping, but feel too responsible to leave. If any of these hit you in the gut, you're not in love. You're in bondage. They don't see you as a person. They see you as an emotional life raft. And they'll climb on top of you, even if it drowns you. You must let them sink, to save yourself. This will be the hardest thing you ever do. Let someone fall. Let them sit in their chaos without trying to fix it. Let them feel the weight of their own consequences. You will feel like a monster, because you've been programmed to believe that abandoning someone's dysfunction is an act of cruelty. But it's not. It's the greatest act of self-respect. Carl Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. If you don't make your own patterns conscious, you'll keep mistaking emotional servitude for love. And manipulators will keep feeding on you, because you won't even know you're bleeding. But once you awaken, you reclaim your empathy as a gift, not a leash. The rising, from savior to sovereign. You are not a healer. You are not a fixer. You are not their emotional crutch. You are a sovereign soul with the right to say, I will not carry what is not mine. I do not owe you my energy even if you're hurting. My love is not a license for you to bleed me dry. When you say that, they will rage. They will guilt trip. They will accuse. But beneath that reaction is fear. Because they just realized they can no longer control you through your compassion. And that is the beginning of your liberation. In part 4 we complete this ritual. You'll learn the final key to dismantling manipulation. How to become psychologically untouchable by owning the darkest parts of yourself. It's time to stop being prey. And start becoming the predator of your own shadows. They asked for your guilt. They asked for your silence. They asked for your self-sacrifice, your memory, your identity. And through it all they left one thing untouched. Your shadow. Because they were terrified of what would happen if you ever woke it up. Carl Jung didn't write to help people become nice. He wrote to help them become whole. And wholeness isn't light. Wholeness is war. Between who you've been trained to be and who you truly are beneath the conditioning. Now you've seen the faces of manipulation. Now it's time to become someone who cannot be manipulated again. To do that, you don't need more affirmations. You need this, the integration of your darkness. Let's begin. The most manipulated people are the ones who refuse to get angry. The world tells you to stay calm, to rise above, to not let them get to you. But Jung's warning was clear. Every form of addiction is bad, no matter whether the narcotic be alcohol or morphine or idealism. Idealism. The belief that love is always soft. That kindness will heal everything. That being the bigger person is a virtue. But let me ask you this. How many times has being the bigger person left you empty? How often did you forgive someone who never changed? How often did you stay silent to keep the peace, while dying inside? That is not nobility. That is self-abandonment. And manipulators thrive off people who refuse to feel their rage. Why? Because rage is a boundary. Rage says, this ends here. Rage is the psychological immune system saying, get out. But if you suppress your anger, you allow the infection to spread. And Jung knew, the shadow you ignore will rule your life from the dark. The power of the integrated shadow. Imagine this. Someone tries to guilt you. But your inner shadow whispers, let them. Someone demands your loyalty. And your shadow growls, earn it. Someone punishes you for being yourself. And your shadow laughs, watch me do it louder. This is not cruelty. This is sovereignty. Jung's process of shadow integration teaches us that every rejected emotion, anger, selfishness, pride, desire, is not a flaw. It is fuel. Raw primal energy. When you suppress it, you become a victim. When you integrate it, you become unshakable. You stop needing permission. You stop explaining yourself. You stop handing over your soul in exchange for crumbs. And the manipulators? They feel it. They see it. They back off. Not because you became aggressive, but because you finally stopped being available for their tactics. You no longer argue to be understood. You understand yourself. That's enough. You can watch someone cry without losing yourself. Compassion with boundaries, not codependency. You can say no without guilt, and without needing to explain or justify. You allow others to be disappointed by you, and you feel free. You stop fixing people who refuse to evolve. You let them face their own consequences. This is the shadow integrated. This is your protection. This is the shield manipulators cannot penetrate. Carl Jung warned, knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people. Because as long as you stay unaware of your inner wounds, you'll keep projecting. You'll see potential in abusers. You'll see woundedness in manipulators. You'll see chemistry in chaos. But that's not love. That's trauma looking for something familiar. The final step to becoming untouchable is this. Withdraw your projections. Stop assuming others are like you. Stop assuming they feel the way you do. Stop assuming good intentions from broken people. Instead, observe. Watch. Listen, not to their words but to your nervous system. Does your body relax around them, or brace itself? That's your truth. That's your inner compass. That's the part of you they could never steal. Stay away from people who ask for your guilt, your silence, your history, your identity, your empathy. They do not want a relationship. They want possession. But now you know. You've seen the script. You've walked the battlefield of your own unconscious. Now you rise. Carl Jung didn't teach us how to be good. He taught us how to be whole. And in a world that profits off your brokenness, your wholeness is an act of rebellion. So be the rebel. Own your shadow. Speak the forbidden truths. Set fire to the roles you were forced to play. And walk away from anyone who demands your soul as the price of their comfort. Stay away. And rise. If this video awakens something in you, something primal, something powerful, don't let it fade. Comment the words, "I reclaim my shadow," if you're ready to step into your power. And subscribe for more raw, unfiltered psychology that cuts through the lies and leads you back to your soul. Until next time, stay aware, stay sovereign, and stay away from those who fear your fire.